Hello. Welcome to the Address of Fear. If you love horror stories, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. If you're ready, let's get started. As Harold Miller drove toward one of North Dakota's desolate, abandoned villages, he gazed out at the gloomy landscape and took a deep breath. The chilly gray light of the early morning made the land he had traveled to seem even more bleak. The houses must have once been filled with life, but now, after years of abandonment, everything was silent and fragile. Only the winds howling, the echoes of Harold's footsteps, and the distant chirping of a few birds could be heard. The village was in ruins. The houses, with cracked walls and broken windows, appeared to bear the marks of times long past. The people who had once lived here must have migrated to farmhouses near the river, but the village, once a place of settlement, had gradually transformed into a dead town, forgotten over time. Harold was a solitary man. He had lived away from crowds and noise for years. Although people had always found it strange that he chose to live alone, he had always believed that solitude was peaceful. In recent years, driven by the desire to solve the puzzles in his mind, he had been wandering between villages, exploring abandoned places. This village, too, seemed to hold a mystery, a secret waiting to be uncovered. It was the dark past of the village that had drawn him here. Among the neighboring towns, rumors circulated among the locals about this abandoned place in the north. Years ago, a brutal murder had occurred in the village. A farm owner had killed his wife and 2 children one night, then vanished. After that night, no one had stayed in the village for long, and anyone who came seemed to leave suddenly. Though the legend spoke of a curse on the village and that something was wrong there, Harold had never believed in such stories. After all, similar tales could be found in every town, right? The only usable structure in the village was an old farmhouse. Its faded blue and white paint had peeled away, and the walls were cracked. Yet the interior still appeared to be intact. Around the farmhouse, beyond the ruined garden, Harold decided to enter the house. He forced open the door of the long-abandoned house. As he stepped inside, a wave of cold air hit his face. The interior of the house carried a sense of abandonment. The air felt heavy, but it was also as if time had stopped, with everything still in place as it had been. Inside, the house was as deserted as the outside. The furniture was in place but covered with dust and dirt. A layer of dust had accumulated on a table, evidence of years of neglect. At that moment, Harold felt a strange sense of unease, but he quickly brushed the feeling aside. Suddenly, an old faded writing on the wall caught his attention. The writing was nearly erased, but still legible. "White spirit is waiting for you." Harold stared at the writing for a moment, a smile appearing on his lips. It must have been a joke. In an abandoned village, in an abandoned house, an old inscription. There was no logical explanation, but somehow a strange fear crept into Harold's mind. The unease began to grip his entire body. He started to question the meaning of the writing. Who was the white spirit? Was it just a legend, or was it real? As he explored further into the house, Harold continued to feel the same strange, oppressive sensation in every room. The old, faded writings on the walls seemed as though they would trap the entire house in some kind of ominous force. The traces of the past were everywhere. Memories from forgotten times echoed within those walls. Suddenly, Harold felt a chill on his back, as though some other presence was watching him. He turned around, but there was nothing there. For a moment, he thought to himself, "Come on, you're overthinking this," and took a deep breath. But then he felt his heart start to race. He moved to the other rooms, where every corner was dark and cold. As he opened the door to one room, the door creaked, loudly, echoing through the house. Harold flinched for a moment, but when the sound stopped, he thought nothing more of it. However, something still bothered him. With every step, the shadows seemed to grow deeper, and the feeling that he was being watched intensified. It was as if something else was there with him, and that he wasn't alone in the house. There was no logical explanation for it, but a force seemed to be taking hold of Harold. As the dark hours of the night approached, Harold found himself unable to sleep. He had heard another sound in the house, as if something was moving in the attic. For a moment, he thought he saw a shadow pass by, but he couldn't quite figure out what it was. As the hours passed, he became more aware that he was not alone. Something was watching him, and it was getting closer. A spirit, a presence, darkness, and the old writing, "White spirit is waiting for you," echoed once more in his mind. Harold, when he woke up, tried to convince himself that everything was normal. But from that day on, he would feel that something was different inside the house, that something was approaching him. Harold, spending his first night in the abandoned farmhouse in the village, settled onto the old bed in the corner of his room and decided to wait for the first light of dawn. As the night fell, the house seemed to open into another world. The air between the walls grew heavy and there was a chill and fear in every room. The sky was cloudy and even the moonlight could barely penetrate. Every corner of the house seemed to carry the memories of people who had once lived there, but now it was buried in silence. At that moment, Harold began to think again about the strange stories he had heard in the village. The villagers spoke of the white spirit, but Harold had always approached such tales with skepticism. Now, as the fear of spending the night in the house began to take hold, he quickly turned on the light, trying to escape the unease of being alone in the dark. Yet, even with the light, accepting that everything was normal did little to calm the sharp sense of discomfort within him. After midnight, the air inside the house suddenly changed. It became colder and heavier. In an instant, Harold felt a prickling sensation run down his back. His body began to sense that something was wrong. Despite the closed windows, a breeze entered the room, filling it with a cold breath. The sound of the wind echoed off the walls, creating an unsettling atmosphere that surrounded the room. This caused an unconscious fear to rise within Harold. For a moment, he closed his eyes, hoping the feeling would pass. But it didn't. On the contrary, with each passing minute, the fear intensified. The house was silent, but that silence felt even more terrifying. He was not alone. He could feel it. A faint creaking sound came from the corner of the hall below, causing his eyes to snap open. He turned his head quickly, but saw nothing. Everything seemed like a dream that would soon pass. At that very moment, the house's lights suddenly began to flicker. One flash, then another, back to back. As Harold's eyes tried to adjust to the darkness, he felt something begin to unravel in his mind. The flickering light seemed like a signal. Something was watching him. His heart rate sped up and breathing became harder. He quickly turned toward the window, but despite closing it, the darkness outside slowly began to seep into the room, and then, at that moment, Harold's heart nearly leapt out of his chest. A silhouette emerged from the darkness. A figure in a white dress, elegant yet terrifying, slowly walked from the far corner of the room. Her face was almost entirely obscured, but in the shadows, only the outline of her silhouette was visible. At first, Harold tried to dismiss it as the result of his exhaustion and being alone in the dark. But with each step, the silhouette became clearer, and the tension in the house grew stronger with every movement. He squeezed his eyes shut and took a deep breath, hoping to lose sight of the figure when he opened them again. But the figure was still there, standing at the end of the hall. Harold quickly took a step back, his heartbeat nearly echoing in his ears. He was frozen. For several seconds, he kept his eyes tightly closed, but fear prevented him from turning his head to look. All he could feel was the presence of that terrifying figure. Taking a deep breath, he tried to summon his courage. "This can't be real. It's just my mind playing tricks," he whispered, but the words did nothing to calm him. At that moment, a cold gust of wind entered the room again. This time, the whispering sound in the wind emphasized that nothing was natural. The white spirit echoed once more in his mind. The silhouette was still there, but now the figure had moved even closer. Its steps were followed by the dark shadow of its tall, slender shape. Slowly, as the figure approached from the dark corner, Harold began to step back again. His heart raced faster, and his body trembled. He had reached the pinnacle of fear. He no longer knew what to think. Fear was slowly intoxicated his mind, clouding every thought. As he took one more step back, in the heart of that moment, something cracked. A light illuminated the dark house, revealing the figure behind it. The white dress was pale and worn. An ambiguous face, translucent, seemed to appear. When the figure revealed its face, Harold closed his eyes tightly for a moment, frozen in place. When he opened his eyes again, the silhouette was gone. However, he could still feel the fear shaking his body. That being, that silhouette, was somewhere here. This was not a dream or an illusion. Harold knew that now. It was real, and that presence posed a threat unlike any fear he had ever experienced. Fear had completely settled in his mind, and the night he spent in the house had given him further proof. The white spirit was indeed waiting for him. The next morning, Harold woke up with dark circles under his eyes, a sign that the fear of the previous night had not left him. The entity he had seen and the strange sounds he had heard during the night had left his mind in a daze. Still affected by the fear from the night before, he felt as though he was being watched by some presence in every room of the house. However, when he opened his eyes, everything in the house appeared normal, as if it were just a nervous morning following a long night. Only the feeling of unease within him continued to grow with each passing hour. He remembered the previous night like a nightmare, questioning the unanswered mysteries of the house's past over and over in his mind. After some time, Harold decided to speak with one of the village elders. The old woman was one of the longest-lived residents of the village, having lived there for many years, and perhaps she knew something about the old spirits in the house. Over the years, the woman had shared stories she had heard in the village, tales of missing people and lost times. These old stories strangely lingered in Harold's mind. Maybe she could uncover the secret of the white spirit. The woman sat in a stuffy room stirring an old tea and looked at Harold. Her eyes, with a gaze carrying the marks of the past, seemed to stare deeply into the distance. The white spirit. Her eyes. They once stripped the souls of everyone in this village, the old woman said, her words echoing with the fear of years gone by. She was a woman, young, beautiful. She had a man she loved, but he left her. He loved someone else and betrayed her to the core. Her name was Sarah, but even saying her name is frightening. After losing the man she loved, Sarah lost her mind. All she left behind was a broken heart and an emptiness. As Harold listened carefully to the woman's account, it felt as though time was rewinding, and every word echoed through the house. According to the story, after being abandoned and betrayed, Sarah had gone to a cliff near the village and ended her life. However, after her death, Sarah's spirit did not find peace. From the rocks by the river, her ghost began to wander around the village, slowly rising from her grave. At night, the villagers had seen her terrible figure, a woman in a white dress, never fully visible, but with eyes filled with immense pain and anger. And that spirit, the old woman continued, follows people. She slowly drains their sanity, leading them into dark thoughts. She chooses those with weak minds, and in the end, she forces them to commit suicide. Each of her victims carries the pain and anger of the white spirit within them. Her eyes, they steal a person's mind. Fear, unknowingly, takes over their soul. A fear stirred in Harold's mind. The silhouette he had seen that night and that cold presence had intoxicated his thoughts. Now, combined with what the woman had said, the horrific night started to make even more sense. The white spirit was not just a story. She truly existed. And now, she was here, in this house, waiting for Harold. As the woman finished speaking and sipped her tea, Harold noticed the fear in her eyes. He realized that even the old woman had been under the influence of the white spirit for years. A spirit, a being, a lost heart. And now it had come to occupy the center of Harold's life. As he walked back, Harold's thoughts were becoming jumbled. The white spirit's past, the dark anger of the past, was now approaching him. The rocks, by the river, the place of the woman's death now looked even more terrifying. With every step, it felt as though the entity was drawing closer. He thought that fear was no longer just a feeling but had merged with a reality. He decided to investigate the house's secrets more deeply. As the day turned to dusk, Harold returned home. He turned on the lights, but there was still the same strange chill in the room. It felt as though something was waiting in every corner of the house. Something was watching Harold. As night fell, The silence within the house grew so thick that it felt as though it would be difficult to breathe. The lights began flickering again. Once more, Harold felt that cold wind entering the room. He closed his eyes for a moment, hoping to relax, but the unease within him ran too deep. At that moment, an entity, an eye, was watching him. Those eyes, those cursed eyes. The old woman's words echoed in his mind again. The white spirit has come to steal your mind. When Harold opened his eyes, a figure appeared from the dark corner of the room. A woman's silhouette. Her white dress fluttered in the wind. Slowly, her eyes slid toward him. Her eyes. Those eyes filled with pain. The white spirit was now watching him and drawing closer. With each passing night, Harold's life was slipping further into nightmare. The white spirit's presence was creeping into every corner of the house, trying to claim his soul. At first it had started with small, frightening events, mysterious whispering sounds, objects falling suddenly, and footsteps echoing from dark corners. But over time, the spirit began to wrap around Harold's mind even more deeply. At night, he would wake in a fractured state, intoxicated by insomnia and fear. One evening, as he sat in his room, a faint rustling sound from the corner of the room immediately jolted him awake. He turned his head, his ears muffled, but when he looked around the room there was nothing. For a moment he tried to calm himself and close his eyes, but at that moment, the silence in the house pressed down on him, heavy and dark like death itself. When he closed his eyes, right inside his head, as if it were whispering directly into his brain, he heard a voice. "Can you see me?" Harold opened his eyes in shock, but there was nothing in the room. Everything was the same. Only the fear inside him deepened with every passing minute. His mind was filled with a jumble of questions, a search for answers. But no matter how hard he tried, the fear pulled him deeper with each day. One night there was only darkness in his room. His eyes were slightly tired, but he couldn't sleep. Suddenly, a voice echoed in his mind. "You will always be alone, forever alone." This time, the voice had taken the form of a figure, a face, appearing as a black shadow, distorted by gravity, materialized in front of him. Its eyes seemed to glow with the darkness, filled with ambition and anger. These eyes were penetrating directly into Harold's soul. It was like a deep, dark void, a consciousness trapped within it. "You will be alone," the sinister voice repeated, this time more than a whisper. It was a deep, suffocating threat, ringing in his ears. Harold took a deep breath and tried to tightly close his eyes, attempting to banish the figure, but tonight it seemed nothing would pass. Suddenly he felt such a coldness that it was as if the entire room's air had frozen. His body was engulfed by the terror, and although he tried to force himself to open his eyes and look away to avoid seeing the terror, something stopped him. He was intoxicated not only by the appearance of this entity, but by the rising vibrations of the voice within him. From the corridor below, he heard footsteps quickening. A figure was moving through the house's darkness, her white dress, like before, now more visibly glowing, almost emitting a deathly glow around her. Harold trembled as he stepped into the room, staring at the figure. But the figure had vanished, disappeared. Only the terrifying whisper echoing above everything else remained. On another night, exhausted from insomnia, Harold's eyes suddenly snapped open. The room was drunk on darkness, but something was different. He felt so weak, as if he couldn't move a step away from the bed where he was supposed to spend the night. It was as if tonight would mark the final point of everything. As his eyes slid across the corners of the room, the same white figure appeared on the wall in front of him. Only for a brief moment, for just an instant. But in that moment, its face was as clear as the reflection of fear in its eyes. "You will be alone forever," the miserable voice said, looking deeply into his eyes. Harold stepped back in terror, but he felt as though his body had merged with the floor. He couldn't move a muscle, his eyes had gone dark, and his mind had become foggy. This entity was watching him in the only way it could see him. It was as if every night it was taking one more step closer, fragmenting his mind a little more. Its eyes were nothing but a pure white void. The fear inside him consumed all his thoughts, transforming into something else. To be alone. This echoed from the depths of his crumbling mind. The White Spirit's terrifying game was intoxicating him more with each passing day, and each time he was getting lost more in this fear and loneliness. The White Spirit played a game in every corner of his mind, pulling him toward a painful, destructive loneliness at every opportunity. Each game weakened Harold, stealing his sanity and filling his mind with dark thoughts. And with every passing night, the figure's eyes grew more distinct, and Harold's soul was getting lost in this endless cycle. One night, Harold sat up in his bed, sleep-deprived and exhausted, but his eyes were clouded. He was so deep in insomnia that he felt like he had lost almost everything. But something forced him awake. A silhouette appeared on the dark wall before him. Her white dress seemed to move as if blowing in the wind. And that figure whispered, "One more word. You will be alone, forever alone." At that moment, Harold's heart began to beat wildly. The White Spirit would be the end of everything. The fog in his mind had now transformed from just a feeling into a reality. With each passing day, Harold sank deeper under the influence of the White Spirit. His eyes were becoming increasingly blurry, and he could no longer see the world as clearly as before. The furniture in the house seemed to move on its own will. Even in his own room, a chair would return to its place several times, and books would slide under the bed's headboard. But the most terrifying thing was the narrowing of the rooms. When he woke up at night, he felt as though everything in the house was suffocating, with every corner covered in darkness pressing down on him more and more. Everything felt strange, like something was broken. When he entered a room, it seemed as though there was less space to move. Everything was closing in on him, watching him. One night, Harold suddenly noticed faint writing appearing on the walls. It was so blurred that his eyes could barely distinguish what was real and what was a hallucination. On the walls, something written in his own handwriting appeared. It was something terrifying and malevolent. The writing appeared unevenly, with letters that disappeared and changed between the spaces. "Follow me. The end is death." The words continued to haunt Harold's mind. It wasn't just writing, it was a call, a threat, and at the same time a waiting. With each passing second, the influence of the White Spirit grew stronger, and its presence was felt everywhere. The voices inside his mind continued to rise throughout the night. Sleep had become a luxury. His eyes never closed, and he spent every moment like a nightmare. Day and night had blended into one, and he had no idea how much time had passed. There was only one thing: the presence of the White Spirit and its games. Harold was now detached from the outside world. There was no one around him. One morning, when he woke up and looked around, he realized the village was completely abandoned. Every house was empty, the streets were silent, and not a single person could be seen. As he slowly stepped outside, he realized with deep fear that the entire village had been deserted. It seemed like this place had become a home only for him and the White Spirit. Everything was empty. It was an abandoned place, but at some point, Harold realized this wasn't a nightmare. Everything was real. The silence of everything felt as though it had separated him completely from this world. At that moment, he heard a voice, a whispering voice, from deep within, from the depths of the house, from a dark place. "Follow me. The end is death." The words sounded like an order. It echoed like a call from the deepest corner of his mind. Harold, with the growing pressure of fear within him, stood motionless. But there was another voice, even deeper this time. "Follow me." These words were not just from a ghost. They were a reflection of Harold's own thoughts. He had to follow the White Spirit, take one final journey with it. And Harold, with a scream, headed toward the depths of the house. He couldn't control it. Now, fear was pushing him harder with every step, breaking his sanity. The chaos in his mind had drawn him into a labyrinth of terror. The walls in the house were narrowing with each passing minute. In every room, every corner, there was only one thing: the White Spirit. That terrifying entity seemed to occupy every point inside the house. Its eyes became more distinct with each passing moment, its gaze crushing his mind. As Harold walked through the corridor, guided by the voices he heard behind him, in that silence, there was only one thought: to go with the white spirit. Every corner of the house made him feel deeper fear. The white spirit, there in the depths of the darkness, was like a reflection. It, and only it, appeared in every corner. All the walls, everything, had become more intertwined with that terrifying being. Harold took another step, and suddenly, he noticed that the lights were beginning to go out. Everything around him was covered in darkness. In an instant, he thought everything had vanished. With a scream, he had to go deeper. The white spirit, pushing the very limits of his mind, was calling him. "Follow me," said the spirit, and as Harold took a step, he momentarily disappeared into the spirit, lost under its control. There was no turning back now. Harold had completely lost his sanity. Under the influence of the white spirit, the boundary between mind and body had completely vanished. Everything in the house, every movement, every sound, was now a hallucination, a game. Day and night had merged into one, and time had become a hallucination. His eyes drifted across every corner of the house with a vacant stare, while his soul was being pulled into a deep void. With each passing moment, each second, Harold was slipping further under the influence of the white spirit. What had once made sense was now turning into a nightmare, and that nightmare was now heading towards an end. One day, Harold found himself in the basement of the house. All the rooms and corridors had somehow dragged him here. This was the darkest and most abandoned corner of the house. The floor was covered with soil that had accumulated over the years, and there was a musty smell in the air. As his eyes tried to distinguish something in the darkness, suddenly, something appeared before him. A face. A pale, old, and decayed woman's face. The true form of the white spirit had finally appeared before him. The woman carried a deep sense of anger and dark vengeance behind her pale skin and grim gaze. Her face blurred with time, then reappeared. For a moment, Harold wanted to question whether this was real, but his eyes remained locked on the woman's face. He had come to fully believe that everything was corrupted, that everything was a game, and that everything was being dragged towards destruction. The woman took slow steps toward him. The deep void in her eyes pierced directly into his. His mind had become too exhausted to bear it any longer. Fear was slowly turning into a form of acceptance. The white spirit was drawing nearer with each moment, and each of its words was burrowing deeper into his mind. "Follow me. Take one more step, and I will stay with you forever." The woman tried once again to deceive Harold. She took one more step toward him. A momentary unease left a deep void in his mind, causing Harold to slowly make an internal decision. This was a moment of destruction, and at that moment, there was no turning back. Shaking with fear, Harold took another step. He gave in to the woman's call, feeling a strange peace in knowing the end was near. As the white spirit echoed through his mind with a final, terrifying whisper, everything was coming together. As the void inside him slowly expanded, Harold began walking in one direction, towards the riverbank. He was being pulled towards this area outside the village to the deepest parts of his soul. In his mind, the void was widening with each passing minute, and with every step, every breath, he was being completely detached from the world. Fear exploded suddenly in his brain one last time. There was nothing left. Every bond that had once held Harold, that had once tried to keep him alive, had been severed, and Harold moved towards the riverbank. The river flowed darkly and murkily, and he decided to surrender himself to its cold waters. The white spirit was watching him from within. Darkness rose from the waters. Harold, slowly accepting the void, the fear within him, began moving deeper. And then, he decided to let himself fall into the water. Nothing mattered anymore. The white spirit's games had brought him this far. The coldness of the water made him accept that everything had ended, that his soul and body had been abandoned to the darkness. With one final scream, he was submerged. After that, Harold's body was never found again. The depths of the river remained a mystery, like a secret. When the villagers realized Harold was missing, something about it sent chills down their spines. The village's abandonment once again hid a dark secret, and everyone, with this final disappearance, knew there was something more hidden along the riverbank. In the end, it became clear that Harold had vanished, and the white spirit had claimed its final victim. The village was once again abandoned. Only the remnants held the fear and nightmares of the past. But another man, another lost soul, was expected to come along, uncovering the dark secrets left behind, just like Harold had done in the past. And then, this fear would continue forever.